Well, it's time now to have our second dip into the Sunday papers. Here with me reviewing them this morning are the broadcasters and writers Gemma Forte and Edward Adu. So welcome back to you both. Gemma, we're kicking off with a story that you've seen in the Sunday Mirror, and it's a really grim story, isn't it? Talk us through it. It's about Nicola Bulley.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking. So somebody saw fit to steal her images and post them with a different identity on a dating app, which is the very most depraved type of catfishing, surely. So obviously her family were informed and were completely horrified and disgusted. You know, she only went missing last January. And this dating website, which I'd never heard of actually, it's not one of the more well-known ones, and it doesn't have a particularly good rating online. It's called Smooch or something. So I would say if you're dating, perhaps avoid that one, because there are other dating sites where you can confirm your identity. And it seems a bizarre thing to do in so many ways, completely immoral, absolutely disgusting, but also she's a very familiar face. So how they thought they weren't going to get found out eventually, I don't know. But for daters everywhere as well, people who are trying to navigate these sites, it's not a very reassuring story either. There's enough to think about without thinking that somebody's identity has been stolen.
Yeah, that's so true. But and mostly, as you say, it's just appalling for the family, isn't it, to have to face something like that. Edward, take us to the Telegraph. A story here about advertisers and cancel culture.
Yeah, so this is something connected to the Tory party. They're concerned about a group of advertising companies who are affiliated or connected to a company called Conscious Advertising Network. Now, they reckon they're sort of part of a movement to basically cancel culture, that if anything which is not aligned in their kind of world, then they will not authorise or tolerate it. Now, apparently this company's been around since 2019, and the reason why some Tory MPs are concerned, they say that some of the staff are involved in the Stop Funding Hate campaign, and this has led to boycotts against outlets like The Sun, Daily Mail and the Daily Express. And they've said their manifestos tell brands how to improve their performance on sustainability, hate speech, misinformation. Now, and let me quote Ben Bradley, he's the MP for Mansfield. He said, "We've seen that the banking sector has been overrun by cancel culture. It's deeply worrying that a similar takeover is happening in advertising." Now, in defence of the Conscious Advertising Network, Mr. Dubbins and Miss Kingby, I think they're affiliated. I think they're part, obviously the directors. They've said that the CAN actively supports free speech, and we never called for any ad boycotts based on political views. So it seems it's like they said it's kind of like a cross between who is actually coming up with the truth, whether this is a case of the Tory MPs are concerned about certain brands being aligned or having political views. I mean, it makes you think about the advertising world and whether it should be independent. It shouldn't really have any affiliations connected or politically. But if this is the case, then, I mean, clearly there should be a discussion between this network and with those those agencies involved to say, well, look, it's not a case for you guys to obviously influence your power and your influence. It should be free and it should be independent.
Yeah, do you want a quick word on this, Gemma? I mean, there's a big issue here, I guess, about brands being very conscious of where they place their names, and obviously some people feel very insulted if certain brands don't want to advertise somewhere. I mean, there is an issue here that's worth discussing, I guess.
I mean, by politicians? Not really. I think this is just part of their rather pathetic culture wars. They've got nothing else to offer at this point. I mean, there is actually a video somewhere of Lee Anderson, who is the deputy chairman, is he, of the Conservative Party, saying we will fight the next election on culture wars. So, you know, public services don't work, cost of living crisis, but let's have a go at advertisers who don't want to advertise somewhere. They can do what they want. They know what their demographic is. It's up to them.
Okay, let's move on, shall we?
But Gemma, shouldn't? Quick point. When you're watching a TV program, you're going through your papers. Shouldn't those advertisers? Shouldn't they be free from being affiliated to or having their views? I mean, I think that's the point which is kind of being made.
No, the point is, if I had a product and I've paid for a huge advertising campaign, then I should have some say at where that spend goes and whether it aligns with my brand.
Okay, shall we move on? Are you happy we move on, Edward?
Let's move on.
Let's move on to another issue. It's something that we can come back to on future episodes, I'm sure. But in the meantime, Gemma, take us to the Observer, because, again, we were talking in the last hour about the fallout from the by-elections. This is the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey, talking about his take on things, having had that big win in Somerset.
Yeah, and I think this is the kind of thing that we should be focusing on. Things like, should we have reform of our entire electoral system? So what Ed Davey is saying is that, okay, if you vote tactically, then you could see the Tories suffer a massive defeat at the next election. We currently have the first past the post system. It is pretty archaic, and personally, I would like to see proportional representation, and I wish that one of the parties would campaign for that, ideally Labour. Whether they will or not, I doubt it, because what happens is whatever party gets into power, they decide it's not in their best interest. But currently what happens is we don't have particularly great representation in terms of how we've actually voted. So Ed Davey is saying there's organisations like Best for Britain, there are other ones like the Movement Forward, and they are saying at the next election, if it is in your interest to see the Tories go, then you need to think about voting tactically. If you look at Write-It, very interesting. Obviously, quite a few people voted Green, and they might not have wanted to give their vote to Starmer for many reasons that I might even understand. But the point is, you end up with a Tory MP. So it's very interesting, but that's the system that we're stuck with. I think we have the same system as Belarus.
And probably other countries around the world as well, I'm sure. Yes. Yeah, well, it is a debate that goes on, and whether things will change when the bigger parties are more likely to benefit from it is an open question, isn't it? Okay, let's move on, shall we, to the Times, the Sunday Times, Edward, and a story about crossing the road.
Yeah, so the DFT, Department for Transport, they actually want to increase the time that it takes for us to cross over the roads. Now, they've cited for older people or for people who may be obese. Now, the question to this is, if you're a motorist, I mean, in one of my local roads, the traffic lights, it's only on green for 3 seconds. Now, the current time for people crossing over the road is 6.1 seconds. I didn't know there was an actual specific time given to people crossing the road. They want to increase this to 7.3 seconds. Now, one of the directors or someone working on behalf of the DFT has said that it's to try and to make it more inclusive for people who find it difficult crossing over the road, that if they're only given a short time to cross over the road, it may not give them the freedom and the flexibility to leave home and to actually cross the road. But then a second question should be asked here, where it's not sort of a health and safety issue, but if there are people who find it difficult crossing over the road, by increasing the time that it's given to them to cross over the road, in a sense, is it trying to tackle if somebody does have an issue with obesity and they can't get over the road in 7.3 seconds or whatever the estimated time is, if it ends up being increased to 10 seconds, then how's that combating or trying to help people who may have an issue with weight and they can't cross over the road?
I guess so, but I suppose it takes into account lots of different groups, doesn't it, Edward? And the fact that we have an ageing population, maybe there are elderly people as well who just take a bit longer.
No, of course, and that should be respected. But I think one of the issues here, and listen, I'm not having a go at people who are obese. I think it's the general question of, it's for motorists as well, that if they are stuck at the light and then suddenly people are giving 10 seconds to cross over, and then suddenly they try and cross over, the car stalled in front of them, they could be there for up to 5 minutes. And I've been there, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, that's true. It's always frustrating, isn't it, when you can't cross the road because the traffic's going past when you're a pedestrian, but when you're in a car, it's so annoying when the lights go red. Anyway, let's take us on, Gemma, to the the big movie clash that's going on at the moment. Lots of publicity around Barbie and Oppenheimer opening the same weekend, and there's an article here in the Express, isn't there? And great hopes, actually, and maybe a wet weekend has also added to all of that as well, that it could really help the movie industry.
Absolutely. So these two films, Barbie and Oppenheimer, usually studios will do anything in their power to avoid a clash and juggle the schedules because they think that one film will lose out. But actually, social media created this hashtag. It was hashtag Barbenheimer. And what's happened is this new phenomenon where people have gone, I'm going to go and see both on the same day. So it's a lot of movie time, but of course the movies are very, very different actually, which probably helps as well. So if you're going to see hours and hours and hours of a film, then it's nice that you've got the contrast. And it has taken an absolute fortune. And I think movie executives are sort of scratching their heads going, oh, maybe this is the way to go.
We're out of time. Thanks both.